down.
Look at that grass.
Yeah, it's just chilling. Leave it there. Don't kill it. It's alive. How's it going? Hi, Willow. Would you like to be in the podcast with us? Cool. Yeah, let it be. It's alive.
I'm going to have to pull this.
Don't pull the Swede. It's alive. Let it be.
Okay. I'm going to scoot back then because it's distracting me.
It's distracting you? That is so mean! Oh my gosh! You didn't kill it! It's alive! He just took his head off. Like he wanted to be part of the podcast.
Are you done?
Sad thing. Oh my god.
Are you done?
Yep.
Okay.
That was just such a sad thing.
What are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to talk about how trailering a horse and a few different horse training methods. I guess how we train them and how the horse really feels, scientifically speaking. Because we found this book.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into the book. So I came across the book called Evidence-Based Horsemanship with Dr. Stephen Peters and Martin Black. So Stephen Peters is a neuroscientist, and Martin Black is like a longtime horseman. And so in this book that you haven't read yet, they just talk about horsemanship from a perspective of neuroscience, like how the horse's brain is developed, how it's constructed and developed, I suppose, and kind of comparing, contrasting their brain and neurological functions with the human brain. And I find it absolutely fascinating. I'm pretty sure I came across this book via the All About Horses or Because of Horses podcast, which was a really good podcast to listen to. So, and Dr. Peters was the guest on that show. And so it's quite a small book for such a large topic like the brain. But they did a really good job, in my opinion, kind of breaking it down. It's easy reading. It kind of reminds me of like a high school textbook in some areas, but not as boring. And so they did really well, just kind of breaking down the areas of the brain, which I have a hard time kind of looking at science and what science says versus what our emotions are saying. And one thing I found quite fascinating, which we've touched on this a little bit just in our conversation together over the years, but one thing that I found really fascinating was the fact that the horse's brain, they have a smaller frontal lobe than we do, whereas our frontal lobe is quite large in reference to our whole brain. Theirs is quite small in reference to their whole brain. And if you guys don't know, the frontal lobe is where we do like our reasoning and like emotional constructs and thought processes and stuff like that. So I guess the way I interpreted it, the horses have much more of like a kind of black and white sort of thought process. And their brains are actually really fine-tuned, if you will, for motor control and balance, which makes a lot of sense because they're fascinating at that, you know, at being able to move. And this is one thing we've talked about, like when Cody's off halter and he's at liberty and he gets excited and canters or even gallops toward us and we're just like, oh my gosh, you're gonna run right into us, and he just can stop on a dime. Whereas human beings are a bit more clumsy, to put it plainly, but we have much more reasoning skills
and emotional ties toward
Right.
so much that horses, I guess from what I've heard you talk about, what you've been learning is that horses don't have as much of a reasoning and emotional tie to things.
Right.
And I guess what I mean by that is if we see, say, a bear and we've had a bad experience with a bear, we're going to like go through all these, our minds are just going to be scared out of our minds because we've already seen one, and especially if we had a bad experience, we're going to tie in our negative emotion. If the horse sees a bear, their instinct is going to kick in and tell them they need to either fight or flight. But
and our brain does similar.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of mixing a few different concepts there. I would say like you mentioned, the reasoning and emotional aspect isn't as in the forefront in the horse's mind as it is in ours.
Yeah.
They do have some reasoning and emotional skills, I think. And as the doctor and authors put it in this book. And we're not going to break down the book like in entirety. And in fact, I think we're kind of getting off course. Like when we're talking about trailering, this has been one of the most, if not the most difficult training aspects that you and I have went through with our horses, be it Cody and Willow or even Mocha.
Yeah.
And at the time when we originally got Mocha, she would just send right on the trailer. And so they digress over time. And I think it's because their instinct comes back and kind of reprograms their brain. And so they look at a trailer, and that's just a scary place to be instinctively to them. And so that's been a really difficult area. And like we've mentioned before, getting Cody on the trailer about a year ago was very difficult. Now he's walking on with all four legs and hooves nicely planted in the trailer. And we're not quite to closing the door yet, but he's definitely very calm about it. And so in that way, I had a very, I made a huge mistake as a horse lover and horseman. And a lot of you probably roll your eyes and be like, that's the dumbest mistake ever. And the mistake was, Cody got on the trailer. This is about 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks. You're always correcting my time
that's
judgment.
You always get the time wrong.
Oh, right. So I always get the time wrong. About 3 weeks ago, Cody went on the trailer, and he was in there with all four hooves, and he was getting his nice jackpot treat in the headstall where you can put hay or whatever. And I had been experimenting with just having the halter on him and getting him in the trailer. And I'm a knucklehead and didn't close the door behind him and wound up daisy chaining the halter rope inside the trailer where it goes. And needless to say, he got spooked and started backing out of the trailer, got spooked even more, and he was tied. And so the halter rope cinched down, and now he's in this full-on, totally amped up, scared situation, and all the tension's on the rope. And so I couldn't get him out. And then Alyssa was right there and very calmly said, "Hey, you have a knife?" And so I pulled my knife out and cut the lead rope and released him. He didn't dart off after that, which I found really, really cool.
That's surprising. I mean, I had Willow just about trotting into her pen, so if he darted, he wouldn't dart right toward her.
Right.
But
he didn't dart. He actually just stopped right outside the trailer. He bowed his head and took a deep breath and turned into me, actually.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I apologized at that point. I mean, we were all shook up, and because that could have injured or even killed him. And I understand that. Point is that that was a very traumatic experience after gaining so much positive ground in trailering, where I thought he was going to be like, absolutely no to the trailer after that. And so 3 weeks ago, that happened. And now we're right back into him walking on the trailer and him being comfortable with all four in the trailer. And so I wanted to read just a bit of an excerpt from the book, kind of about these situations, about their memory and traumatic events. And it has to do with the hypothalamus portion of their brain. And so I'll just read it. Horses have an amazing memory. They remember events, they remember places they've been, and they can remember experiences they've had with us extremely well. It can be a problem if there are things we would like them to forget that may be a negative thing in our program. When it happens, it just means we need to offset the bad experience with enough good experiences to outweigh the bad experiences. If the bad experience was bad, they may only need a few good experiences to be comfortable in the situation again. But if it's a real traumatic experience, it may take 100 good experiences before they can be comfortable in the same situation. The good thing is that horses are extremely forgiving and they want to be comfortable. Once they get confident that they can avoid the trouble or that we will not get them in trouble, they will be in a good frame of mind and easier to work with.
That's good. That's really good. So then let me ask you, do you think that the experience Cody had was just a, quote, bad experience? Or do you think that that was a really, quote, traumatic experience?
Well, it's interesting because I've kind of been trying to play that around in my mind, and I've taken it from different angles. Like, clearly, for me personally, that was a very traumatic experience. Yeah. And I have reasoning skills, you know? So as I read through this book and understand the anatomy of the horse's brain versus the human brain, not understand it as a scientist, but understand at least the basics a little bit better than I had before reading the book, we have the benefit of those reasoning skills. So like you reasoned, hey, like there's a situation, which at that point you could say my amygdala had kicked in and I was in freeze mode, essentially, because I didn't really know what to do. And you kind of, outside of that emotional situation, you were there in the physically present, but you weren't emotionally tied into it. And so you were just able to very calmly say, hey, your knife. Oh, yeah. And so, but that was very traumatic for me and Cody. And so to answer your question, I don't know, because his reaction after the fact to me was much like it wasn't very traumatic for him. But
I think it could have gone both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my opinion is that, and it's kind of like what I've gained. So my dad and Cody have been working together for a little over 2 years now. And it's been, I mean, every single day. I mean, we've been gone like 1-2 days out of the 2 years that we've had Cody. And so they spend every day together. And it's, I mean, regardless of the and
training, not all day, but we're usually spending
like,
at least an hour in the morning.
More like 2 or 3 hours in the morning with them. But I mean, my point being, regardless of the training and touching up, whatever you want to call it, that my dad has put Cody through, or vice versa. I mean, they spend a lot of time together, learning each other, learning to trust each other, learning to love each other, learning to communicate with each other. And for me to see like that experience play out, I saw it as a complete, like, it was a huge amount of trust that Cody had with his person. I mean, like Cody, and many of you may know Cody didn't have a very pleasant past before he came to his previous owner, who then sold him to us. But prior to being, I mean, Cody almost died.
He was a rescue.
He was a rescue, and I have a feeling Cody has had a lot of traumatic experiences, and not much that I can go into detail because, I mean, Cody hasn't wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, right. Well, and we don't know all the details for sure, but there's definitely some signs.
Yeah.
That he'll get, and that's another part of the book that I just read. Like, I didn't know that their memories are so extreme.
But you've mentioned
but we've
that
kind of
past.
alluded to it, but
Yeah.
I haven't had like somebody like a scientist say horses' memories are great.
Yeah.
And so to hear that is, or to read that, is really cool. Cause it just solidifies some of the hunches that I've had about, where they're at. So the cool thing is that he didn't dart off. He didn't, I mean, I don't know if I'm expressing it right scientifically, but he didn't get mad.
Yeah.
Cause the book also talks about how like, and this is probably for a completely different discussion, but the way some people kind of like think like, oh, well, my horse is being disrespectful, or he's trying to like pull one over on me, or like, scientifically at least, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Like horses, their brain, you could say, doesn't even have the capacity to process those sorts of reasoned thought processes.
Really interesting.
So for us to say our horse is being disrespectful, and therefore we need to, and I'm going on a tangent here, but we need to apply pressure until they give us two eyes, and then we can release that pressure. Just zeroing in on it from a respect or disrespect perspective is incorrect and inaccurate scientifically. I mean, there may be other reasons why an approach like that is valid. There might be. But from a pure respect, disrespect, that's what we humans create. We create the feeling of respect or disrespect.
So that's really interesting and really cool to hear because, I mean, there's been a lot of cases in which, I mean, these few Facebook groups that I'm in, horse groups that I'm in, it's, somebody will post and be like, oh, my horse is so disrespectful, they won't turn into me, how do I fix it? And then there's this, in a complete other group, say someone had to give their horse an injection and the horse like ran off, and this person didn't take that as a horse being disrespectful. Instead, in this post, the person mentioned that they thought that the horse was literally scared and upset because of the situation.
Well, and that's a really interesting topic as well. So the injection, if and we're talking, a needled syringe for like a vaccine or something like that, or medication. Well, the horse has different pain receptors than we do in our skin, and different connections to their brain, or you could say heightened in some ways. So, and the book talks about this in a number of ways. They're just different. It doesn't make them, inferior to us, which is a common concept, where humans, we kind of, and I think it doesn't just apply to horses, but we come into other, heck, we as human collective have issues within our own species when we talk about superiority and inferiority. Racism is one, somebody has a different color skin than me, and therefore they're inferior to me just because of their genetic makeup, right? Horses are so neutral, it seems, in all of those ways. Like the book talks about, like, they don't, if they roll on the ground and get all muddy and they have grass and hay and dirt all stuck in their mane and tail, they're not wondering like, how do I look, or
don't care.
they're not embarrassed around their herd mates because they're not all shiny and pretty and speck free.
They don't care.
Those are all human constructs and part of our frontal lobe that they don't have in their brain.
Yeah.
So fascinating.
However, I do feel like horses have a certain amount of like feeling and maybe not as much emotion tied to said feeling, but I mean, like anything else, they do have feelings. I mean, I've experienced it firsthand with training. So have you. So many other people. I mean, it's a...
And the scientists aren't saying they don't have feelings.
Yeah.
They're just saying the way the feelings are presented and interpreted and acted upon, that's the way I understand it anyway, are different than humans.
Yeah.
Fair enough, right?
Yeah. Which is interesting.
But we have a tendency, and we talked about this a bit in our previous session on expectations, where we have a tendency as humans to inject our own agendas on not only horses, but all the animals that we're working with.
Yeah. And it's all about, I gotta saddle them by the 31st of February. I gotta get the dog trained for the agility thing by the 1st of March. I gotta do this, that with the chicken to make it lay its eggs. Like, it's all about our agendas. Whereas I feel like we should all be partnering, more or less with all of our animals that we're working with in training.
And so when it comes to this trailering aspect of horsemanship, and really, because trailering is a necessity.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Because
part of it too.
You can't always get, emergency ambulatory veterinary care. And not only that, just for the fun recreation and adventure of it, to be able to go to different locations to ride and whatnot. I really believe that the horses enjoy that. I don't have like science to back that up necessarily, but maybe that's just a projection of my own feeling onto them. I'm open to that. But when it comes to, being patient with the trailering process, I think it's just really cool to understand that we have different thinking minds and different abilities. And the fact that they are made up cognitively more for movement and control of their bodies, and we're made up more for reasoning and planning and stuff like that. So those two things come together like a perfect puzzle.
I feel like we balance each other out very evenly.
And so when we're on a ride and we're reasoning that aspect, and they're like moving their body in balance, and that feels fantastic when the rider is in perfect sync and harmony with the horse, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So
it even looks beautiful.
Yeah.
And I haven't ridden since, I haven't ridden in a while. And I'm just a step closer to riding Willow every day. I mean, I know you've gotten on Cody a little bit recently, so you kind of are starting to get back into the
a little bit
scheme of riding and, getting to feel it. But this time it's a lot different. And I guess that's a conversation for another episode. Right?
Yeah, it is. Well, and again, because I'm trying my best the way that I know how, number one, to learn more about him and his thinking mind, and also learn more about his past and his memory, and be respectful of the idea that, let's face it, no matter how much tack or tools or whatever, there's no way physically that I can possibly control him, even if I wanted to. And so to relinquish control is an amazing transition, because I'll be honest, like for me, initially learning to ride a horse, and this might have been the wrong way regardless of training methods, but in my mind, I could say like I had more of a control mindset. Like, if he starts to bolt or something, I'm going to be able to position my hands on the reins or my legs or my body movements or whatever in a way that controls the horse.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking of it more of along the lines of acknowledging where they're at in their mental state, and hopefully to benefit from the process of understanding that before it gets to the position of going overboard.
How do you think that process relates to trailering? You bring that up. That's a really interesting topic. How, in your mind, how does that relate to being able to confidently and comfortably, from both parties, the horse and the owner, be able to send them in the trailer?
Well, just being observant of even the very little subtle cues that their facial expressions give, and their ears, their eyes, even as we're walking toward the trailer. So we have our trailer out that's in a way that's kind of on the start of the walking path around our property that we go on often. And I've noticed just, in the past couple months, like if we walk by the trailer, either he totally ignores it, or if we get too close to it, it's kind of that apprehension sort of approach until we pass it. Recently, though, and I've been walking a lot with Cody off halter, so he's completely at liberty with me. And we'll start walking toward and then past the trailer. And now, instead of him being apprehensive about it and kind of wanting to ignore it or get away from it, he's actually broken the stride with me and has chosen, all right, well, I know I get like a huge dopamine response by going into that trailer. And so even with the doors closed on the trailer now, there's been, a handful of times that as we're approaching it and walking past it, he'll divert and go to the trailer and use his sensory whiskers to check it out. And like, oh, is that door going to open and allow me to go in?
Aww.
So to answer your question, it's the more I change and I'm receptive and responsive to his thoughts and emotions, the calmer he's become. And now, even just yesterday, using just a very mindful technique of asking him, I don't even have to say anything. So,
isn't that your goal with riding, though?
Yes.
I mean that's like your meaning a rider. You don't really want to say, to have them stop,
right?
It's with your mind and your body, right?
Right.
That's what I've always been taught.
Yes, and regardless of training styles, that's what we're all like.
That's our ultimate like goal. I think in horse training is to be able to comfortably and confidently like ride all gaits and stop the horse and like smoothly and perfect cadence, and just like you're riding in perfect harmony. You're no longer a horse and a rider, you're one. And it's been a dream of mine to ride a wild horse since I was like 2. It's been a while. And I'm very slowly getting close to that dream with working with Willow, every single day. And every day we accomplish something new, and every single day I'm like, man, like you did that. I helped you do that. That's freaking awesome. And I'm sure a lot of you could relate to that, whether you've trained a wild or domestic horse or not. I mean, there's been moments, you can probably relate to that with Cody in the trailer.
Yeah.
I helped you get comfortable with that trailer. I helped you get up there confidently and comfortably.
And it's so, unlike, and maybe it's just my makeup, but it's so different than even, say, training a dog.
Yeah.
Which has its own, like, unique coolness about it.
Which I'm also just starting to experience, and it's complicated there. That's an interesting topic.
Yeah, but the horses reciprocate more than I've ever experienced. And so as they're learning that, they're reciprocating and almost sort of like, well, and people have talked about that, like they're mirroring that energy.
Yeah.
And so that's really cool too. What else? Anything else to add in? I think we went on a kind of a bunch of different ideas and topics here. The thing is, I guess to sum it up from my perspective is that my mind is blown by reading about our minds.
Yeah.
And how they're similar and how they're vastly different. And I think the main takeaway for me is regardless of the actual training method and style, be it positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, which, by the way, personally, I'm kind of tilting toward not even liking those terms because of how it relates within our minds. But that's just my own opinion. But regardless of training style, just understanding how our minds are different can really build or detract from our abilities to actually achieve the goals that we want for ourselves and our horses.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
I like that. And I mean, it's communication, not control. I think everything we do with them, and hopefully all of our other furry companions, be it a chicken or a cat or a chameleon or a horse or whatever.
Well, chicken's not furry; it's feathery.
Yeah, same difference at that point. I mean, I feel like we should always listen to them and acknowledge their feelings because, hey, they're living and they have feelings too. And it's, communication, not control.
Yeah. So leave it at that. Yeah. Thanks, guys. And
we'll see you next week for another episode with Reinforce the Horse.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy holidays 2021.
Yep. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Reinforce the Horse. Morning, Willow. I hope you all are doing well this morning. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing good.
Good. That's always good to hear.
I'm going to have to pull this.
Don't pull the Swede. It's alive. Let it be.
Okay. I'm going to scoot back then because it's distracting me.
It's distracting you? That is so mean! Oh my gosh! You just killed it! It's alive! He just took his head off. Like he wanted to be part of the podcast.
Are you done?
Such a sad thing. Oh my god.
Are you done?
Yep.
Okay.
That was just such a sad thing. Good. Yep. Are we restarting?
What are we talking about?